If I were shopping for a 3/4 ton pickup truck in America today, my top pick would be the GMC Sierra that is right next to me. This is my favorite 3/4 ton truck, but is it the best one, and is it the right one for you? Let's take a look. No American truck would be complete without a ton of chrome and an enormous grille, so of course we have both of them on the Sierra. Let me know what you think about the design down there in the comment section. I think the Sierra is definitely more attractive than its mechanical twin, the Chevy Silverado. The Silverado's front end is just, let's say, controversial, but the Sierra looks a little bit more traditional. Now, the enormous grille is fully functional. You can see this comes up nearly to my shoulder, and that's because we have nearly 1,000 pound-feet of torque from this diesel engine and a ton of trailering ability. And with that kind of ability in the 3/4 ton and 1 ton trucks, you need a lot of cooling. So we have massive amount of cooling openings here, cooling openings below the bumper, and even right up here integrated into the hood. In terms of design, I rank the Silverado last in this segment, and I think this is just about as attractive in a different way to the Ram 2500 and Ford F-250. The F-250 is perhaps a little bit plain, a little bit very last generation. This really strikes an interesting pose. This is really imposing. It says, look at me. It says, I have a lot of chrome. And if you want more of a baleen whale type look with a lot of horizontal slats, you can get that in the Ram 2500. We have full LED headlights here, LED fog lights below, chrome pole hooks right there, and well-integrated parking sensors. This is a metal bumper, even though it is body color painted. If you're looking for a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton truck in North America, it's a three-way race. We have the General Motors twins, we have the Ram 2500 and 3500, and we have the Ford F-250, 350, and 450. So in this video, quite logically, I'm going to be talking about the Sierra and how it relates to those other options. So if for some reason you're one of the commenters that's like, why is he talking about a Ram and a Ford in a video about a GMC? That's the reason, because if I were simply talking about the Sierra without talking about how it compares with the competition, this really wouldn't be a review. It would be a puff piece, and you're watching a review, so let's get back to it. The Sierra is available with 3 different cabs. We have a regular cab, a double cab, and a crew cab. This is the crew cab, and you can have standard or long beds, but the regular cab is only available with the long bed. So depending on how you have your Sierra configured, the length could range from 235.5 inches to 266.9 inches. This is quite a long vehicle for North America. Parking this, which does not have the long bed in the back, is a little bit tricky in suburbia, but thankfully I live out here in the forest, so it's not too much of a problem on its own. But definitely keep in mind that trucks this size can be tricky to maneuver, especially with trailers attached on narrow roads. And that's one of the reasons that I don't have a 3/4 ton truck. Theoretically, I could use one because that Case 570 lurking in the background weighs over 12,000 pounds. So this could be handy to pull it around. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But my trailer combination and this truck just can't navigate the gravel road that I'm on here. A little bit that way, there's some really tight turns, and this is simply too big to pull that trailer, and that's why I don't have one. As with any of the other trucks from GMC, Chevy, Ram, and Ford, there are a ton of options available on the Sierra. This particular model is a 2500 Denali, but again, there are a ton of cab options, bed options, engine options, trim packages, standalone options, etc. If you're looking for one of the most customizable vehicles on the face of the earth, it's going to be a North American pickup truck. Whether we're talking about a half-ton, 3/4 ton, or 1 ton truck, there are just so many options around, it's hard to make generalized statements and comparisons, because this particular Denali 2500 may have a lower or higher payload or towing rating than some other Ram or some other F-250 out there, but mix and match the option packages and you could get very different results. So it's important to keep in mind that your towing ability, your payload ability, performance of the vehicle, size on the inside, etc., that all depends on exactly which model you get in which lineup. So bearing in mind that not everything on this Sierra 2500 is going to be on every Sierra out there, let's take a closer look at some of the features. We have full LED turn signals right there, LED headlights with an LED accent strip inside. These are a multi-module reflector design, so you can see there are 3 modules there. That lower one is used for the high beam. We have LED fog lights down below. LED turn signals over here integrated into the side view mirror. That's a nice touch with that twin design right there. Duramax logo right there, since this does have the optional diesel. Marker lights on the side above the fenders. Nice touch right here. We have some LED lights integrated into the side mirrors. These can also be directed around like that. If you want to throw light to the side, you can turn those on and off so that way you can light the cargo, the path, etc., or just use them as a work light. Around the back, we have another marker light right there just above the rear wheel well. There's steps to make getting into the bed a little easier because this bed is pretty high off the ground. They're also integrated into the rear bumper, and then we have red turn signals right back here in the rear. When this generation of the Sierra launched, the Multi-Pro tailgate was a feature exclusive to GMC, but it's now going to be found on Silverado models very soon. This is a lot more practical than what we see in the Ford lineup because not only can this act as a step if I click the right button here, as I'm hunting for it, there we go, and then pull this down. You can use this as a step to get up into the bed, but you can also get an integrated sound system right there. It's a Bluetooth connected system. You can leave it in this particular position and have cargo hanging out the rear. So say you wanted to put 8-foot sheets of something or 10-foot sheets of something, you can have them at a bit of an angle there hanging out here. And you can also flip this section back up and have it retain that cargo if it's, say, an 8-foot sheet of plywood. Because keep in mind, this particular model does not have the 8-foot bed. Now, there are some trick tailgates from other manufacturers, but nothing really in this space that competes with the Multi-Pro tailgate. The Ram 2500 and 3500 do not get the barn door setup that we find in the Ram 1500, and of course, the only other interesting tailgates out there are the Ridgeline's one that moves to the side. That's obviously not a competitor to this, and the Ford F-250 and 350 simply have a step that comes out from the top that does nothing to improve the cargo practicality that we see in this tailgate. GMC gives you the option of two completely unrelated 6.6-liter V8 engines. The gasoline engine produces 401 horsepower and 464 pound-feet of torque. Rather oddly, it's mated to an older 6-speed automatic transmission. The more popular engine is going to be this one. It's a Duramax 6.6-liter diesel, producing a whopping 445 horsepower and 910 pound-feet of torque, thanks to an enormous turbocharger over there on that side of the engine bay. This engine is mated to the newer 10-speed automatic. For me, at least, the interesting thing about this 10-speed automatic transmission is that General Motors is not taking credit for it for some reason. You'll notice we have Allison logos on the side, Allison logos on the website, but this transmission was in fact designed, developed, and is manufactured in a General Motors factory. GM said that the Allison brand name has a long history with Duramax and with the Sierra and the Silverado lineup, and that's why they decided to license the name. But the origins of this transmission date back to the 10-speed automatic that we find in a number of other General Motors vehicles, like the Camaro and their truck line, etc. The regular duty versions of the 10-speed automatic transmission were developed in coordination with Ford, and they're nearly identical whether you take a look at a Ford or a GMC or a Chevy, depending on the model you're looking at. But the heavy duty versions, each manufacturer went off and did their own thing based on those original designs. And that's why this is somewhat related, I guess you could say, to the 10-speed automatic transmission we find in the F-250 and F-350, but it is not in fact the same transmission. Trailering gadgets and cameras are the other big reason I like the Sierra 2500. There are 15 different camera views, tons of cameras all the way around the truck, and those two camera inputs that you can use however you want. You don't just have to put one on the inside and one on the outside. You can do whatever you want with those camera inputs. And then based on the camera systems in the truck, we have a jackknife alert system. We have the invisible trailer system, so if you do use a camera on the back of your trailer, you can see what's behind the trailer in the infotainment system as well. The blind spot monitoring system in the truck will tell you how long the trailer is, so you can be more alert in your blind spots. And then we have a lot of additional tech that's really handy. I don't have the ability to test it out on this truck because I don't have all the harnesses, all the apps, and a trailer that's compatible. Now let's dive into the sticky subject of payload and towing. The days of half-ton, three-quarter-ton, and 1-ton defining what you could put in terms of payload in the truck are long gone. According to GMC, the payload rating in this vehicle should be between 3,536 pounds and 3,979 pounds. Yes, that is 2 tons of payload in a 3/4-ton truck. But as always, options and features will deduct from that payload ability. And the model that I am driving today has a door sticker rating for 2,995 pounds of payload. That's about 500 pounds lower than the lowest spec on the GMC spec sheet. So keep in mind that your particular payload and towing ratings will depend on the engines, the options that you select. The Multi-Pro tailgate will take away from your tow rating, the wheels, the tires, the running boards, everything that you add to the base version of the vehicle will deduct from payload and towing ability. On the Sierra 2500, towing should range between 14,500 pounds and 20,000 pounds conventional, 16,650 and 18,500 pounds fifth wheel. This does have the fifth wheel prep package on it. That's also going to deduct from the payload rating of the vehicle. If you get the Sierra 3500, you could tow up to 36,000 pounds with the exact same engine and transmission that's in this vehicle. But there is something you should know about towing those heavier weights. It's probably not legal in your state. Theoretically, the Sierra 2500 would be the perfect vehicle to tow this Case 570, the tractor that I use regularly. This weighs nearly 13,000 pounds as equipped right here with the front bucket, the rear box grader in the back. Theoretically, that's under 20,000 pounds conventional. Parked right next to the tractor is this trailer. It's a 26-foot flatbed trailer. This has a GVWR design of over 17,000 pounds. So this trailer is more than capable of handling that tractor on it. And indeed, I have moved the tractor with this trailer before. But there is a legal problem here. This particular trailer has a sticker on it derating it to 9,999 pounds GVWR. And there's an important reason for that. In most states in the United States, in fact, 85 to 90% of Americans live in states like this. I could not legally tow this particular combination with the license category that I have. I'd need a commercial or a non-commercial Class A. Because some states go by actual trailer weight and some states go by trailer weight rating, not what you actually have on the trailer, this trailer has been derated to just under 10,000 pounds, 9,999, so that way this is legal in more states in the United States and more situations. So if I need someone to service the Case 570, it has to be towed by someone with the Class A. I can't do it myself anyway. Some states like California make it pretty easy. The weight limit here is 10,000 pounds conventional, 15,000 pounds fifth wheel. Some states make you do math. It's a combined weight rating, so the weight rating of the trailer plus the weight rating of the vehicle cannot exceed a particular amount, regardless of what you may actually have on the trailer. It's all by the weight rating. The twist there is that in states like Texas that go by combined weight rating rather than the actual weight of the trailer, some of the higher GVWR trucks could really exceed things even with this trailer that has already been derated to 9,999 pounds. So be sure and check with your state before you decide to start pulling larger and heavier loads, because the fines in many states can be extraordinarily severe, perhaps over $1,000 and possible license suspensions if you are caught doing the wrong thing, towing heavier weights or heavier weight rated trailers. The good news is that many states out there have an agricultural exemption. So if you're towing your agricultural tractor or hay bales or things like that, you may be exempt from some or all of these weight limits. However, if you're towing cars or SUVs or your boat or whatever, keep in mind the weight limits. Front seat comfort for the Sierra 2500 and 3500 is pretty comparable to the F250 and F350 in most trims. You should know that even in this Denali trim, however, we don't have four-way adjustable lumbar support, something that we do find in the Ford seats. It's also worth noting that on longer journeys, say if you're really heading across the country in a fifth wheel or a gooseneck or something like that, you might want to take a look at the top end trims of F250 and 350 because they do have anti-fatigue seat cushions. It's an active massage feature and it definitely is going to be more comfortable than the model that I'm driving here. Jumping into the back seat, remember that this is the largest cab available in the Sierra and it really shows. I have a massive amount of legroom with this front seat, comfortably adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, about 18 inches or so there. I do have a little bit less headroom than I might have thought, however, about 2.5 inches if I lean my head right back there to the headrest. That may have something to do with the moonroof in this model. You'll really notice that the roof line changes in here if you get the moonroof. I have about a 3-inch drop right here in this section of the headroom area. So if you're a little bit taller, you may actually be staring at this sort of pop-down roof where the glass section up front goes. But the rear bench is really, really wide. I could easily fit 3 adults back here if I needed to, and even in the center position, I still have a reasonable amount of headroom. The seat bottom cushions flip up, and we have a nearly flat floor back here. We do have a little bit of a bump up right here in a storage area, but that is basically removable. The rear seat backs also have a somewhat hidden storage compartment inside. You can see that's a pretty large and deep storage area. We then have a fold-down center armrest with 2 large cup holders right there, but the seat backs do not fold forward. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that this is not a base trim, so obviously there are going to be some things in here that you won't find in the base version of the Sierra. We have a pretty standard sized moonroof. In a vehicle this big, it looks a little bit small, but it is in fact just about the same size as the one that you'll find in the average vehicle out there. From this view, you can really see how far that rear roof line ducks up right there just above the rear passengers' heads. But again, taller people may end up staring at the roof a little bit. The driver and front passenger get fixed height shoulder belts. I am a little bit surprised by that. I had expected a little bit more adjustability there. In the Denali trim, we have a logo embroidered on the 2-way adjustable front headrests. The seats themselves are leather and it's a 2-tone design. So on the outside, this is dark brown, and on the inside, this is sort of a navy blue. These seats are both heated and ventilated, and as you can see, we don't have terribly aggressive bolstering, something that we see on pretty much every other major pickup truck in America. Moving on over to the doors, we have that same sort of 2-tone scheme going on with a blue armrest. The bulk of the door is made from brown plastic. We have a dual glove box arrangement over here on the passenger side. So a small upper glove compartment right there where you could store some small smartphones, things like that. And then a larger lower compartment where I was just barely able to fit a 10-inch iPad as long as nothing else was in that compartment. The dashboard is a soft-touch injection molded dashboard for the most part, but we do have a few hard sections here and there. One of the things that disappointed me about the Sierra in this generation, to be honest, is that the dashboard design is very, very familiar. It looks basically like the previous generation, only with a few things massaged around, so it didn't really break the mold. We also have an infotainment screen that feels like it's a little on the small size, especially when compared against the new 15-inch screen that we're going to be finding in the new Ford pickup truck soon, and of course the 12-inch screen that's available in the Ram 2500 as well. We have two large air vents on either side, some contrasting trim there. You'll only find the wood trim on either side of the center console there and on the doors. There's some physical buttons right down there for the infotainment system, controls for the dual zone automatic climate control system, and a ton of buttons down here, heated and ventilated seats, the exhaust brake, lane keeping assistance, parking sensors, tailgate release, hazard lights, things like that going on there. Also a button to turn on and off the AC inverter. Depending on the version of the vehicle you get, sometimes the buttons may be a little bit bigger, and there are definitely going to be a few of them in the lower end trims. We have a integrated trailer brake controller right there, two USB inputs, 12-volt power outlet. This is where we find the 120-volt outlet. There's a lot of storage areas going on down here. We do have wireless Apple CarPlay, but I chose to have it plugged in, so a nice touch here is that you can operate it in both of those ways. Two large cup holders with another item holder right there for square things in the middle. We then have a large padded center armrest here. You can see this is also that two-tone, or I guess almost three-tone really effect here, because you'll notice that the brown plastics on the doors don't quite match the brown leather on the seats and on that center console. In here we have a lot of storage area, hanging file support, more USB inputs right there, map for the navigation database, and then over on the driver's side we have a large LCD right there between two physical dials. This instrument cluster is not as configurable as some of the large full LCDs that we're starting to see in trucks, but does have all the information that most folks would be interested in, including the auxiliary gauges right up there at the top. The steering wheel is a 4-spoke design. You'll find the controls for the regular cruise control over here on this side, no adaptive cruise control there, and then the controls for that multifunction LCD are over here on this side. As we see in some other GMC models, you'll find the controls for volume up, down, and track up, down on the back of the steering wheel. We have volume up, down over here on this side, track up, down on that side. To the left of the driver, we find the drive mode selector knob. It's this little toggle right there, and then the control for the four-wheel drive system, including an auto mode, which is always going to send a little bit of power to the front axle. That definitely makes the vehicle feel more sure-footed if you're on a gravel surface or snow or ice, that sort of thing, versus leaving it just in too high, although your fuel economy will suffer a little bit. Below there, we have the controls for the headlights, dimmer switches, etc. These are slightly different buttons than we saw in the previous generation of the GMC Sierra. Now it's time to get the Sierra out on the road. From a stop, this engine pulls really strongly to 3,000 RPM, and by the time we've hit 50 miles an hour, this vehicle has already used more gears than a 3/4 ton pickup truck even had 20 years ago. So the 10-speed automatic transmission to some people may seem a little silly, because they say, well gosh, why is it going through those gears that quickly? There's a big important reason. This vehicle does not have to depend on the torque converter as much as a 3/4 ton or a 1-ton truck did with a 3-speed or a 4-speed automatic, or even a 6-speed automatic like we find in the Ram 2500. It also doesn't have to depend quite as much on the engine revving the nuts off of itself in order to get up to those speeds. So you'll notice that if we're tooling along here at say 45 miles an hour and I floor it, there's always a gear ratio where this vehicle can shift the engine into an RPM band to give you the best acceleration possible. So I can floor it here, it goes up to about 2,200 RPM, right in the meat of that power band, and that is incredibly noticeable when you have a lot of weight on the back. So if you're pulling or hauling a lot of weight, you are going to want the 10-speed automatic that we find in this, or in the Ford F-250, 350, etc. Now we do get a little bit more torque out of the diesel engines in the Ford and the Ram, but most people won't notice the difference. On the other hand, they will notice the difference between this and the Ram in the way the transmission shifts and how many gears there are. The Ram does a really great job pulling heavy loads uphill. That Cummins turbo diesel engine is an absolute workhorse, but as far as finesse and towing feel and just the preference that I have for pulling heavier loads, I would choose this over the combination in the Ram. As you might expect out of a vehicle that is this big and this heavy, stopping distances are definitely long. It took 150 feet for this to stop from 60 miles an hour back to zero. That's about 2 school buses longer than the average compact luxury sedan, or a lot of performance mid-size sedans as well. This is also logically quite a bit longer, at least 1 school bus longer than the average half-ton truck. I would argue that handling ability is likely not as important for the average 3/4 ton or 1-ton truck shopper as the average half-ton truck shopper, and that's a good thing because no 3/4 ton truck will handle like a half-ton truck. It's just too big, it's too heavy compared to the average half-ton. That said, the Ram 2500 with the optional air suspension in the rear is going to be the better handling option, mainly because the rear axle doesn't tend to hop as much in the corners. You'll really notice that out on this section of road where the road is a little bit rough, and this is just hopping and bopping all over the place. That's something that we see really in any 3/4 ton truck, including the Ram, if you don't get the air option. As with pretty much any high payload vehicle, the ride quality in the Sierra 2500 is going to be worse than the Sierra 1500, and it's going to be worse in the Sierra 3500 than the 2500 because the springs have to get progressively stiffer in order to be able to support those high payload ratings. The exception in this segment is the Ram pickup truck line with the available air suspension. So keep in mind that there is going to be a trade-off for the increased payload and increased towing ability that we find in this truck, and ride quality is certainly the biggest of those trade-offs. Turning is also a bit of a problem, as you just saw there, because going around that corner, there's always someone parked there, it seems like, and this is not a small truck. And that's, again, one of the reasons that I opted not to get a heavy-duty truck like this, or even a light-duty half-ton truck, because this is just a little on the big side for some of the roads in my area. This particular other road especially is really tricky if there's traffic coming the other way and you have a trailer connected to the vehicle. In my cabin noise testing, I measured 70.5 decibels in here, putting this right in line with the rest of the competition. Keep in mind the diesel engine is going to be a little bit louder in the cabin than the gasoline engine option, but this cabin is pretty muted. One thing we don't see in any heavy-duty pickup truck that I would love to see is paddle shifters on the back of the steering wheel, because when I'm towing heavier loads, I think that's just easier to interact with than the little buttons over here on the column shifter. Because of the high weight rating of this vehicle, it does not have to be EPA fuel economy tested, but I've been averaging 13 mpg over a week of mixed driving. You'll get basically the same fuel economy in any of the diesel competition. Generally speaking, you'll get the highest payload rating in the gasoline engine models. That's because the engine is lighter, and you get the highest tow rating in the models equipped with the diesel because we have so much more torque available. Keep in mind that with this model, the gasoline engine also comes with the older 6-speed automatic transmission. Hopefully that's something that GM fixes in the future. Now let's take a deep dive into pricing and comparisons. Definitely one of the more complicated things to talk about with pickup trucks because there's so many different options, and brand allegiance and brand loyalty is definitely super strong, and that gets a lot of people very animated in this particular segment. But to be perfectly honest, I'll start this off by saying that it's hard to go wrong with any of the big three trucks in America, whether we're talking about Ram, the combination of GMC and Chevy, or Ford pickup trucks. All three of them are excellent options in the heavy-duty segment. The Sierra for 2022 starts at $36,200 for the 3/4 ton version, $37,700 for the 1-ton version. So there's not an enormous price delta between these two vehicles. That's something that I really appreciate because you will notice a slightly wider price delta in some of the competition. And as I said before, the drivetrains are identical in the Sierra 3/4 ton and 1-ton trucks. That's another thing that I appreciate. You don't have to step up into the 1-ton truck to get the more durable transmission like you do in the Ram pickup line. Because there are so many different ways you can configure your 3/4 ton or 1-ton truck, tons of standalone options, packages, different trim levels, off-road, on-road trims, max payload, max towing, etc. Let's just dive right on into the competition. That's probably the best way to talk about this. The first competitor has to be Ford because the F250, 350, and F450 are really strong competitors, and they're the best-selling heavy-duty trucks in the US. Ford goes about their heavy-duty trucks a little bit differently because they split the F350 and F450 apart, but logically, both of those compete with the 1-ton trucks, or so-called 1-ton trucks, from General Motors and from the Stellantis group of companies, formerly known as Chrysler. The best way to think of the split between the F350 and F450 is that the F450 is targeted at max towing ability. The F350 models, theoretically, generally speaking, are targeted at max payload ability. So you'll find the highest payload in the F350, the highest towing in the F450, but both of these vehicles together compete with the corresponding max tow or max payload versions of the Silverado, the Sierra, or the Ram pickup line. Because the F450 is really targeted at that max towing figure, you will see some changes to the front axle, the body, the frame of the vehicle, and the bed arrangements, and the way that some of the packages and options are arranged in the 450 that makes it a little bit unique, but logically it still definitely competes with the max towing ability that we find in the rest of the competition. There are logically two reasons that the F450 is called the 450, not a 350 max tow. The first one is marketing. Obviously, there's definitely an advantage in calling it a different model. The second thing is that we do see a few changes in it that we don't see in the max tow versions of the GMC or the Chevy or the Ram pickup truck line. The F450 has a wider front stance, has a wider front axle, and it also has a different combination of body and cab configurations, a little bit more limited than we see in the regular F350, and just a shuffling of different things around the vehicle to really gear it towards max towing ability. Speaking of max towing ability, let's talk about those numbers now. The Ford Super Duty line tops out at 37,000 pounds of towing ability. That puts this second in the segment. You'll notice that on the GMC page, it says 36,000 pounds is class leading. That is no longer accurate. It is now actually about 1,000 pounds behind the Ford and the Ram. At the moment, Ford and Ram are in their continual sort of towing tug of war, and at the moment, Ram beats the Ford with a tow rating of 37,100 pounds. Keep in mind that there are so many different options out there that it's going to be pretty easy to find a Ram pickup truck that has a higher payload rating than a Ford truck, or a higher payload rating than a Chevy truck, or vice versa. Any of these combinations are certainly possible, but comparably equipped, generally speaking, the Ford is going to be a little bit higher than average. It's also going to give us three different engine options. The base model comes with a 6.2-liter V8 engine, so keep that in mind. It may be less expensive, but it's not going to be as powerful. That produces 385 horsepower versus the 401 horsepower we find standard in the Chevy and in the GMC, and you're going to get a little bit less torque and a different transmission in that model as well. That was done so that way the F250 could have a lower starting price than most of the competition, something that corporate customers and fleet customers were really interested in. If you want the 7.3-liter V8, that's going to give you a whopping 430 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque with a really, really huge amount of low-end torque. That is optional, as is the 6.7-liter diesel that gives you 475 horsepower and 1,050 pound-feet of torque. Honestly, most folks out there are not going to be able to tell the difference in torque between the 6.7-liter diesel that we find in the Ford and the 6.6-liter diesel that we find in the Chevy or in the GMC. 910 pound-feet of torque is an absolutely astronomical number, and for most of the things that shoppers out there are going to be doing, unless you really plan on putting 36,000 pounds behind your truck, you're not going to notice the biggest difference there. Moving along, we have the Ram 2500 and Ram 3500. These currently have the highest tow rating in this segment and the second highest payload rating maximum of 7,680 pounds. But as with any pickup truck out there, max towing and max payload don't happen in the same truck, and obviously there is an enormous amount of variation. Most of the trucks that you'll find on the dealer lot will be decently below that max number. As far as comparisons go, you'll find pretty similar payload and tow ratings in the Ram truck and in the Sierra, as long as they're comparably equipped. Gasoline engine to gasoline engine, diesel engine to diesel engine. These two entries seem to be pretty similar, and that's a little bit different than we find in the half-truck lineup, where the Ram tends to be a little bit below the Chevy or the GMC in terms of corollary payload. The big win for the Ram truck lineup is the interior design, especially the dashboard design. Ram has done a really good job of color selection, material selection, and general dashboard layout. The dashboard is very attractive. It has the big LCD available in the dashboard. It has a lot more premium materials, more premium touches, fit and finish, etc. One thing that I really noticed when this generation of the Sierra was launched is that the interior didn't really feel terribly modern compared to the outgoing Sierra, and things are definitely different in the Ram 2500 and 3500. The downside for the Ram is that this was not a complete redesign for the Ram 2500 when it launched just a few years ago. Instead, it was a significant refresh, and basically what they did was they took the dashboard from the new Ram 1500, which was a complete clean sheet redesign, and they just grafted it in to the 2500 and 3500. The problem with that is that not all of those newer components translated right into the pickup truck. You also can't get all of the modern gadgets and gizmos inside the Ram 3/4 ton and 1 ton trucks that you can in the half-ton truck because, again, the platform is not as new. On the other hand, the Cummins turbo diesel engine is absolutely excellent. 420 horsepower, 1,075 pound-feet of torque, but lots of asterisks here. You'll only get that in the high-output version that you'll find in the Ram 3500. If you get the Ram 2500, then you get 370 horsepower and 850 pound-feet of torque. That is decently below what we find in the Sierra 2500 or the Ford F250 with the diesel. And you'll pay about as much for that Cummins turbo diesel engine and its lower output and its 6-speed automatic transmission as you will for the higher output engines in the Ford, the Chevy, and the GMC with their 10-speed automatic transmissions. At least for the moment, bottom lining the Sierra Heavy Duty is pretty easy for me. If I were shopping for a 3/4 ton or 1 ton truck, I would probably get the GMC. In a rational world, the payload and tow ratings that we find in the Sierra 2500 are more than enough for me, and that means that I wouldn't have to step up into a 3500 like I would in the Ram lineup in order to get the more powerful version of that engine, and that would end up saving me a little bit of cash. I also love the 10-speed automatic transmission. It's a great design. We also find an excellent 10-speed automatic in the Ford lineup, but I prefer the styling in the Sierra a little bit more. I also like the way that they've done the trailering systems in the vehicle, and for me, at least, a 3/4 ton truck would be all about towing, and I love those electronic gadgets, the way that you can integrate that with the CarPlay system for your Bluetooth controllable trailer, the different trailering views, the invisible trailer functionality, all of that I love an awful lot more than the trailer backup assistant feature that we do find in some trucks, including, of course, some GM trucks as well. That's not really high on my priority list. I'd much rather have all of the other trailering doodads there. The GMC also has a really practical tailgate in that new multi-pro tailgate design, and the bed of the truck is one of the larger and I think more practically designed beds in this segment. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section, and what would you get if you were shopping for a new 3/4 ton or 1 ton truck, and why might you perhaps get the Ram 2500 and Ram 3500 over these options here? I was a little bit disappointed, to be perfectly honest, when Ram launched the new 2500 and 3500, or almost new 2500 and 3500, because they didn't leapfrog things in the same way that the Ram 1500 did just a few months before they launched that truck. Let me know what you think about that down there as well. Be sure and find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautos so you can see what I'm driving this week, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all those other social things, and then you can find merch over at AOAmerch.com, and of course you can check out the Alex on Autos website because there's going to be all new web exclusive content coming there soon. I'll see all of you next week.